Welcome back to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and my guest today is Cynthia Wesley Esquimaux, the Chair of Truth and Reconciliation at Lakehead University. Welcome back, Cynthia.
Yeah.
So we were just talking about truth and reconciliation, and I'll put my personal kind of piece on that. So the truth piece, it's funny, I grew up playing cowboys and Indians. And I was happy being either one. And as I tried to understand, as I got older, cowboys and Indians, I started reading about some of the cultural practices and beliefs of Indigenous folks, and got real excited because I thought, oh my gosh, here is whatever, hundreds, thousands of years of culture about how to have sustainable living, which nowadays is a real big issue. So in a way, there's a truth there that we may not think about. But also nowadays, I'm sitting around with friends and family or whatever, and you start talking, and someone will say, geez, those natives, they get everything. They get they get all the extras or whatever. And I kind of go, well, the one thing I know a little bit about is education. And we just had a report on the radio today. Students in the northern communities get $10,000 less in their education than if they were here in Thunder Bay. So right away I kind of go, okay, I know that, I can share that. Is that part of the truth and reconciliation? How does it look on a day-to-day basis for just us normal folks?
Yeah, that would certainly what's going on in the north with education, with social services, with child welfare, with social justice will be part of the reconciliation process. The fact that on-reserve schools get less resources than off-reserve schools is got to be dealt with. And we have a federal government that has said yes. This is the first time we've had a federal government that has said yes to improving resources for education and all those other areas. In the past, it has been more about how do we get rid of the Indian problem? How do we get people off reserve so we have unfettered access to the resources that they live upon? How do we not ensure that they have sustainable housing and sustainable communities? And they are all artificial communities at this juncture because they move people off their traditional territories and put them onto these small reserves, right? So there's a lot about that requires some truth telling. And Indigenous peoples do not get everything, and they do not get everything for free, and they do not even get education for free. Trust me, I paid for better than half of mine. So that's not the way it actually works. And in some of the young people, but that was also part of the agreement. You're going to take the land, then you need to ensure that we have access to education, that our children will be educated. And it means that the kids that are in these communities have access to tuition and have access to a small living amount on a monthly basis. They get, on average, they get about $750 a month to live on, which of course, if you live in Thunder Bay, you know that doesn't even pay the rent, let alone make food and everything else happen. So it is not it's minimal. So this government has said yes, and this government is going to put more resources into it, because we have to imagine as a country, if the entire Indigenous population actually was educated and employed, what they would be contributing to the economy. They would be contributing billions of dollars to the economy. In this city alone, in Thunder Bay, when Lakehead did a project and started counting the dollars that Indigenous peoples bring into Thunder Bay, they came up with about 8.7 of the GDP, which may not sound like much, but it actually translates into almost $400 million per annum.
In Thunder Bay?
That they bring to Thunder Bay. Just Thunder Bay. Where they come in for the hotels, they come in for the shopping, they come into medical, they come into school, they come in to buy their cars, they buy their their lumber, they do all kinds of things here. So $400 million is a pretty sizable chunk of change to come into this city, for a population that people often say are bringing nothing, that they take and they don't give. And it's so not true. And we have contributed more than that. When you look at what Indigenous peoples have given in the context of food, in the context of medicines, clothing, styles, and the gold and diamonds that are pulled out of their territories, the language that we use, Ottawa, Toronto, Canada, Ontario, Manitoba, all those are Aboriginal words, and most people don't even know that. that they're speaking that language on a regular basis. The constitutions, the great law, the treaties, the peace and friendship, the foundations of this country as a peacekeeper on the world stage come from the Indigenous community. And yet people, look down upon the Native community, and that has been a learned dysfunctional lesson. It is not real. So we have to deal with missing and murdered Indigenous women. We have to deal with kids taken into care by social workers who think they're doing us a favor, or the kids a favor by taking them away from their parents. And in the end, totally messing up their lives and giving these kids, placing them in never land, because they don't belong anywhere anymore. So we have lots of work to do. When we talk about reconciliation, we have lots of work to do. We can do way better than we've done. Our people are still a little suspicious of whether or not this is possible. Of course they are. After 600 years of being beaten up, they're not exactly going to be thinking that they're coming to the table and everything's going to be okay now. So there's some suspicion there, but I think we can do a lot better. Our kids, all of our kids, are way better than we were. In my generation, there was a lot of more racism than there is now. I work with kids on the Canadian Roots Exchange and on other youth events, and they have it. They get it. They get that this is all about being human, not about being different races, not about being better or worse than. So I think that that's something that we can actually look forward to, is our kids carrying this forward in a very powerful and strong way.
Our kids are our future, for sure.
Right.
So if people want to learn more about our collective history here, where do they go? Where can they get that kind of information?
Well, they can certainly now get it in academic institutions, which they couldn't have got 20 years ago. They can certainly get it online. We have numerous Indigenous authors that are writing amazing books that are totally accessible. If they don't care about that, they can go look at Jack Weatherford, who is not an Aboriginal man, but wrote a book called Indian Givers and talks about all of the contributions that Indigenous peoples have made. They can read Lee Miracle. They can read Joseph Boyden. They can read, Thomas King. They can read, Richard Wagamese. So there's a lot of authors that have done some tremendous work, and I think that we need to. So there, you can go. They can go to Indigenous Reads. There's Carolyn Bennett's got a program called Indigenous Reads out, and also gifting reconciliation. Hashtags, and you can find the books that you might want to read there. You can watch videos. I mean, we create some tremendous, even in here in Thunder Bay, we have the Walk a Mile series that Michelle DeRozier did, and she has done a new one that's actually screening Friday this week in downtown about how we're going to welcome these kids from remote communities into the city.
And Michelle was a guest on my show a few months ago.
We have, there's an unending supply of information about who Indigenous peoples are. You can call me, and I will happily take me to lunch, and I will happily.
That's perfect. We're just about out of time. So if people want to get a hold of you and find out more, how do they do that?
Well, they can just call the university. I'm easy to find. I'm probably the only Cynthia working there. They can just, they can call. Send me a note on Gmail. They can, look me up. Just Google my name, and there's lots of video work that I've done and lots of conversations that I've had, and we have events at the university that they're welcome to attend. We have the powwows coming up in January, or is it in March? Anyway, we have a powwow coming up in the new year. We have the fall harvest in the fall, and we have events going on all the time. They can support kids at camp. There's many things that we can do.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on the show. And I want to encourage our viewers to check us out on Facebook. We're Community Conversations on Facebook. And stay safe, and hope to see you again soon.